I'm going to tell you a story right now, and I'd like you to really try to imagine that this is happening to you, okay? So whether it helps to close your eyes or just sit back and relax like you're watching a movie, but I want you, as I'm telling you the story, I'd like you to imagine that this is happening to you, because I'm going to ask you a question at the end of the story about how you would respond to a certain situation, and you'll only be able to do that if you are in the story, all right? So this is the start of the story. I want you to imagine that you are a person with a family. You live out by the fields in a farm, and you're a teenager. You get up. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning. Your alarm sounds, and the last thing you want to do is get up, and you're about to hit the snooze button, but then you realize, I can't hit the snooze button, but I gotta go to work. And so you struggle on to put on your shoes, and you make your way downstairs, and as you're walking downstairs, you start smelling your mom's cooking, right? Her breakfast that she's making for you and the rest of your siblings. And it's your favorite food, so you're really happy. And you go downstairs and you start eating your favorite breakfast that your mom's made, and before you can finish it, you hear a honk. Beep, 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 right outside. And it's the truck. It's the truck that's going to pick up you, your siblings, and your dad to be able to go out and work the fields. And so you eat the last part of your plates, and you rush out, and you get in back of the truck, and you go down this dirt road, and you're in the back of the truck. You feel the wind of the air going through your face, and you can barely see the sun coming up, so it's a beautiful sight. And then a couple minutes later, the truck stops. You get out. You look around, and you see a bunch of people there, and they're all grabbing their buckets. They're all grabbing their buckets because they are getting ready to work the fields. See, this is your job. Your job is for 8 to 10, sometimes 12 hours a day. You grab a bucket and you go down this field that sometimes is miles long, and you put fruits, or you put vegetables, or you put whatever you've grown or the farm has grown that day into that bucket. And you have to do this. Your whole family has to do this to be able to just survive, because you need the $3 an hour that you're supposed to be getting paid, so you can provide for your family. And so you look down, you grab a bucket, you look down a row, you breathe in, and you start. And you go the whole day, 8 hours under the sun, picking fruits, picking vegetables, picking the fields. And then at the end of the day, finally, you're so happy it's the end of the day. You look at your hands, and there's dirt, a little bit of blood. They hurt a little bit, but you're glad because you're going to get paid. $3 an hour. You should start adding up how many hours you worked that week, and you go up to the boss that day, and you're getting ready to get your paycheck, and you get your paycheck, and you see the number, and you realize that this is less than you agreed to. Instead of paying you $3 an hour, your boss said that he has changed it all of a sudden, and you're not going to get paid $3 an hour. You're now only going to get paid $1 an hour. And he says, if you don't like that, too bad. Then you don't have to come back the next day. And you look at that number again, and you get angry and frustrated, and then you do what? What would you do? What would you do if this situation happened to you? If you experienced this injustice, what would you do? Put it in the chat. I want to know. What would you do if this happened to you? If this was actually a true story that happened to you, what would you do? I'll tell you what. Many of you know this. This isn't actually just a random story. This actually would happen sometimes in the United States, right? You might think, oh, this might be happens in other countries, but in reality, this sometimes would happen in the United States. Back especially in the 1970s, there was large parts of immigrants that would come, especially from Mexico or other Latin American countries, and they would come specifically to do this type of work, right? Because even though that might not seem like a lot of money, like $3 an hour, but to them it was a lot of money compared to what they could make in their own country. Now here's the thing, that when they would come to this country, they wouldn't have the proper documentations, right? They wouldn't be authorized to work. And so many of them didn't have the luxury, like you all were saying, hey, I would just quit. But many of them, they couldn't quit, because if they quit, they couldn't get another job, because they weren't even supposed to have this one job for, that they had at that moment. And so many of them, because they couldn't quit, because they couldn't go to the police because of fear of being deported, you know what many of them did? Well, many of them did what you all did, right? Many of them did what most of you did right now. Nothing, right? Or you didn't respond right away. Most of them did nothing. They just let it happen. And you know what? That's what most people sometimes do, unfortunately, when somebody more powerful than them is unjust to them. They just sit quietly and they say nothing because they don't know what to say. And many of them honestly didn't even know the language, right? They didn't know how to speak English. And so they felt like they were at a disadvantage. And so today, what we're going to try to attempt to teach you, right? We're trying to not just teach you, but also make you all more comfortable and confident in, is being able to use this voice that every single one of us has to be able to speak about the things that are most important to us, right? Because there's certain fights out there in this world that are worth fighting for, okay? Like injustices like you just heard about right now, those are fights worth fighting for. And I'm not talking about fighting with our fists, but fighting with debating and fighting with our words, right? And bringing to light injustice in our world. Your voice is powerful, but you have to be able to use it. And so many of us are so scared to speak up, especially about things that are most important to us. Look, there's some battles that you're neutral about. There's some things going on in our world that you're like, you know what? I know they're important, but they're not as important to me. However, every single one of us, I really believe there's going to be moments in our life when there's going to be worthy fights that we need to speak up about. I mean, my brothers and sisters that are Asian right now, like you all know that fight is going on right now, right? There is violence being perpetrated against Asian Americans because of COVID-19. And a lot of you have been speaking up in your social media profiles or just having discussions. And so you can't hide from worthy fights to fight in this world, right? No matter what culture you are, no matter what person you are, no matter whether you're a woman or a man. And so our hope is here in Thrive, more than anything else, is to be able to give you the confidence to speak up about those issues that are most important to you. Because that's what leaders really do. Leaders don't have everything put together, but they just have moments in time where they realize that, look, nobody else is going to speak up, so I got to do it. And that's what happened in this situation. Remember I told you back in 1970s when all these injustices were going on with farm workers? You know what ended up happening during that time? A great man named Cesar Chavez, who was also a farm worker himself, he's seen all these injustices going on in his community. And let me tell you what, most of the people would not have deemed him as a leader. He didn't finish high school. He was a farm worker. He was just trying to get by. But he was the type of person that's seen these injustices in his community. And instead of being quiet like most people, he decided to do one thing. He decided to start speaking up about those injustices. And here's the funny thing. He wasn't the greatest speaker or communicator of all time, but he was somebody who spoke with conviction and passion because he cared deeply about his community. And when you care about something and you're passionate about it, it doesn't matter, what ends up happening is people actually start listening to you. And that's what happened to Cesar Chavez. People started actually listening to him, and all the injustices and that were going on in the farm fields, people are starting to become more aware of it. And first it was only a couple people that started listening to him, and then it was more and more. And he'd actually go to the farm fields and tell people, hey, you don't have to stand for this. Like not being paid what you're worth, all these bad conditions you're working under. And pretty soon he had thousands and thousands of people coming to his rallies to speak, to listen to him speak and lift up the awareness of all these bad conditions that farm workers were working under. And he would do is he became such a great communicator that he got people to go on strike from the very jobs that were perpetuating these injustices. All right? Think about this. He was such a great communicator because of his passion and his caring for his cause that he got people to leave their jobs and they went on strike. That's what strike means. It means you go to it's like if you strike the school and you go outside your school and you start saying, huelga, 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 right? The strike, strike, strike. Like, hey, we ain't coming back in this building until it's secure and I'm safe in it. And that's what they were saying about their jobs. I'm not coming back to this job unless I'm secure and safe in it and I'm being paid what I'm worth. Think about this. A lot of these families, they were super poor. They didn't have any money to, saved up in case of an emergency, but they were willing to give up some time, some of their security to follow this guy because of the great communication style that he had. And honestly, because he just cared. See, you can go to a public speaking class. You can, work on becoming a better communicator. But there's something about finding something you're really passionate and you really care about that is going to make you the best communicator than you can ever be. It's not going to be necessarily going to all these classes and practicing all these things. It's honestly going to be finding that one thing that you are willing to speak up about, that you care more about than the fear of what others may think of you. And so I'm going to challenge you right now. I want to find out what that is for you. What is that thing that you would love to speak up? So I'm going to give you a statement. I'm going to give you 3 different statements, and I'd like you to not overthink them. Just literally put down the first thing or the first 2 things that come to your mind, all right? So here's the first one. Oops. The first one is, something I feel strongly about is what? Okay. Something I feel strongly about is, women's rights. Something I feel strongly about is, talking about the injustices going on in the Asian community right now. A problem that needs to be solved is what? What is a problem you see in your community that needs to be solved? So a problem that needs to be solved. Don't overthink this. Just write down what you first think of. Answer this question. This is the last one. I wish more people knew what? I wish more people knew what? I don't know if you've been to a session. All right. If you have not written something down, make a choice and pick something and just write it down, all right? Because now what you have, if you actually did this activity, which I'm hoping that many of you did, all right? If you didn't, then you're going to miss out. But if you did this, then you have 3 things that you're passionate about. Things that are important to you, things that you wish more people knew, and problems in your community that you wish were resolved. And so what I want you to do is I'm gonna walk you through real briefly the process that I go through whenever I start thinking about what I want to speak on. So I literally have done this when I'm trying to plan the presentation for Thrive, or when I'm giving a speech for a high school. So this is the process that I go through to prepare when I have an idea and I'm getting ready to present. And there's really 2 parts to it, all right? Whenever I'm presenting, I think about 2 things. One is I think about what and how. Okay? This is how I prepare for a presentation. I try to answer these 2 questions. What am I going to say? All right, or what do I want to accomplish from this speech? And then how am I going to accomplish it? So let me give you an example. When I'm thinking about what, I'm thinking about what is my main outcome? Like, what is the reason that I'm speaking to this student, this audience, these teachers, these parents? Because so many people start writing down their speech or their presentation without figuring out, what am I trying to accomplish with this? And this is something that's always helped me. I always ask myself this filler question. If my presentation does what it's intended to do, then all my audience members will either learn something, they'll feel something, they'll change something like a belief, a value, or behavior, or they'll take some action. Right? Those are kind of really the 4 biggest things, or they'll decide to take an action. So what am I trying to do? Am I trying to have the audience members learn something? Am I having them try to feel something, like feel confident, feel courageous, feel inspired? Am I having them change maybe their beliefs? Maybe they don't believe that immigrants are good for this country. But then through my presentation, I'm hoping to change that belief to send them seeing that immigrants actually are good for this country. Now, when I was doing the presentation for you all today, when I was talking about the story of the farm worker, I thought about this, right? If my presentation does what's intended to do, then all the audience members will learn that their voice could be used as a tool to lead others. That was literally what I wrote down before I even thought about the Cesar Chavez example, right? So I thought, my main outcome for the earlier part of the presentation was that you could learn that your voice could be used to be able to speak on the issues that are most important to you so that you could be a good leader. And so what I want you to do right now is think about the subject matter. Remember the thing you wrote down that you'd like to speak on? I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to fill this in. If my presentation does what it's intended to do, then the audience members, whoever I present this to in the future, possibly, right? I'm not saying you're going to present this, but if you do end up presenting this in the future, what do you want them to learn? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to change? What kind of action would you like them to know? So once you have that, honestly, sometimes that's the hardest part to get, is to get clear about what your intention is when you're speaking. And then is the second part, right? And we won't do this because we don't have time, but it's basically gathering illustrations, stories, examples that help you get your audience member to that point. So for example, Monica, she wants people to be able to change or have equality for minority groups. And so maybe she talks about some stories, some real life examples of people who have faced inequality because of the way that the laws are framed right now, right? So you're going out and looking for pictures, videos, stories, examples, but to back up what your main outcome is to do, right? So for example, I gave you guys the story of Cesar Chavez, and I chose that story specifically because of my outcome. My outcome was that you would realize, right, that your voice can be used as a leadership tool. And so I went out and looked for a story of a leader who used their voice and it helped them lead other people. And so honestly, that's kind of the biggest two steps that I take whenever I'm presenting to any group, is figuring out why am I speaking to them? What am I trying to accomplish? And then number two, what are the stories, illustrations, and examples that I can give them to get them to that outcome? All right. Waiting. I want you to think about who is a communicator that you really admire. Who's a communicator that when you think of, you think they do a fantastic job at communicating? So it could be a famous person, or it could be somebody that's not famous. Maybe it's like a preacher, or pastor, or maybe somebody in your community, or a teacher that you're like, wow, just the way that they communicate is such a great way. Put it in the